Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And my congratulations on the very first day of school for many Ukrainian students. I wish you a lot of happiness and joy during this academic year. And you can join us as usually to our regular events, which take place every Thursday at 5 p.m. Kyiv time. When your application is ready and all cover letters are completed, the next step for you is to think about how you're going to finance your studying. And many US universities propose different scholarship based on your needs or provides you an opportunity to work on campus or something else. It is very important to you to think about this step in advance. And today we are very happy to welcome our guest, Jason Cronk, Director from Recruitment and Financial Aid, Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania, who will help you and answer some of the most burning questions about financing your master's and doctoral degree. So, Jason, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Oksana. Is the presentation up and going here? Let me see.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Cronk. I'm the Director of Financial Aid and Recruitment at University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. We are a private Ivy League university located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we offer master's through doctoral programs in education and related social sciences. I've been working in higher education for over 15 years, and today I want to share some observations about attending graduate school in specialized degrees in the U.S. and some tips for financing those degrees. I'm going to speak for about 50 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes, and then leave time for questions. I'm also placing a link in the chat that you can follow to register for more information if you see something interesting or if you want to get a little more information from me. I'm not going to speak about my school directly, but I will be using Penn GSE as an example of many of the topics I discuss, since our school is fairly typical among U.S. graduate programs. So first, we're just going to talk about actually funding or actually choosing a program, okay? I get a lot of questions, for example, about the admission rate for different schools. And my advice when you're looking at a specialized master's degree is to ignore the admissions rate altogether. It tells you nothing about the quality of a program, at least not in the way it might as an undergraduate level or for like a commodity degree like an MBA. This is because relatively fewer people apply to specialized niche programs. For example, suppose you wanted to study the intersection of sociology, anthropology, and education. We have a program for that called Education, Culture, and Society, but you can imagine there are fewer people with that specific interest than, say, for a law degree or an MBA or an undergraduate program. The thing to keep in mind is that at the master's level, you're applying to a program, you're applying to a specific program. It's the program that admits you, not the school. So at the undergraduate level, you apply to the University of Pennsylvania. At the graduate level, you apply to the statistics program in Penn GSE. Okay, that's the difference to keep in mind. And that's going to be important when you're trying to understand exactly what type of program you want to apply to. Admissions for specialized programs like the ones we offer at GSC, the admissions team here, we act much more like matchmakers, less than gatekeepers. Okay, so I just feel like that's an important distinction to make when you're doing this. So once you've chosen a program, once you've taken the time to really think about the type of specific program you want, then you start looking at schools. And so once you've narrowed down the program you want, then you focus on the best school for you. So instead of looking at a school first, I would suggest looking at the program first and then a school. When you look at a school, some things you want to keep in mind, some things you want to pay attention to are the culture of that school. Every school in the United States has its own distinct culture, its own distinct feeling about it. And so if you think about graduate school as an experience, you have to think, what kind of experience are you looking for? At Penn, for example, we're known for being very professionally oriented. We're the only Ivy League school with a nursing program, for example, and we were the first school of education here. So it's an important thing to understand is the culture of the school. Of course, looking at the curriculum, is it going to offer the type of rigor that I'm looking for? And then the community. There are some schools where the graduate population is very small. But at Penn, for example, our graduate population is over 50%. So every other person you see on campus is a graduate student. Okay. Um, I say that I'm going to say too that if you look at rankings, okay, look at the rankings for your program first. Okay. Look at the rankings for your program first, and then look at the rankings for the school. Okay. Because at the graduate level, remember, you're not attending the University of Pennsylvania, you'd be attending Penn GSE program in higher education, right? It's a distinction and a difference to really pay attention to. And I'm somewhat skeptical about rankings to begin with, but I suppose they do serve some utility. Rankings for schools, in my opinion, are very much like rankings for wine. Okay. So, for example, there's definitely a difference between, say, $100 bottle of wine and a $10 bottle of wine. But the difference between, say, a $100 bottle of wine and a $120 bottle of wine, that really comes down to personal preference. And I think it's very similar for graduate schools. So, schools that are all highly ranked or all in the same cluster of rankings, you're going to get a very similar education, similar quality of education. The difference being which is the right program and the right school for you. These are just some observations that I I wanted to make because I've speak to students from all across the world when they're trying to evaluate a program and trying to think where to apply. So another another topic I wanted to touch on too, and don't worry, we're going to talk about financing all of this too, but you have to think when you're part of choosing your program is to determine at what level you want to study. So many people tell me that they want a doctoral program, they want a doctorate degree, they want a PhD. And the first question I always have to ask is why? Why do you want a doctorate? Why do you need a PhD? What exactly are you trying to do with your career and with your life? And see, a lot of people think that a PhD is the highest degree, which it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best degree. Those two are not the same thing. Okay. So, whereas a lot of people think of, well, the PhD is the best degree, I like to think of the PhD program as entry level job training for a career in academia. Okay. Entry level job training that's going to take 4 to 6 years of your life to prepare you for work in academia or research. So, if you do intend to be an academic, if you want to work in research, then a PhD might be the appropriate program. But most people will realize a much greater and a much quicker return on their investment from a master's degree than they would from a doctoral degree. Okay. Just some things I want to point out as you're going through the process of looking for a graduate program and figuring out what you might want to do with it. I'll also mention some advantages to studying in the United States specifically. Uh, all countries have excellent schools and excellent programs, but I think there are some differences that really make the US stand out. So, one of the greatest reasons for studying in the US is just the diversity of programs and the diversity of schools. We have over 5,000 institutions of higher ed in the United States. And so, what that means is that there is absolutely a right program for you, regardless of where you want to study or what subject you're interested in. You can find one that has the right curriculum, the right length, the right location, and of course, the right price for your budget. We're going to talk about funding next, but one other thing I'd like to mention is the ability to use a graduate degree to reinvent yourself, okay, or to pivot in your career. This is very common in the United States. So unlike some other countries, in the US, you can study subjects in a master's program that you did not study as an undergraduate. At GSE, for example, our students have diverse backgrounds ranging from engineering to anthropology to social work. They bring all of those interests and they bring that expertise to bear on some facet of education. And so that's what makes us the School of Education. Out of our 40 programs, only two are designed to make you a teacher. The rest are all focused on some aspect of exploring education and how it intersects with society. And I think when you're examining graduate programs at other schools, it's important to really understand the many options that you have. And I just think that looking at schools in the US, you're going to get a really wide variety and a great selection to choose from. So let's move into the funding. Okay, let's talk about this because oftentimes this is where the rubber meets the road. Okay, to be candid, you've already done all the hard work. You've searched for the right program. You've looked at the right schools. You finally found the right program at the right school. You've applied, you've gone through that whole process of writing an essay and getting letters of recommendation and typing your resume and all of these things. You're admitted, and now it comes down to how am I going to pay for this, right? Very few people have enough money in the bank to simply write a check or simply make a payment. And that's certainly the case for domestic students. So, certainly the case for US citizens. It's also the case for a lot of international students. So, I'm going to talk now about how a lot of international students, how most international students, in fact, will fund their degree and what that might look like for you, okay, at the US and at US schools. And the information I give you is I'm trying to be as broad as possible so that it's applicable to any school that you might be considering. Okay. The first thing that I would mention is that the US has a law, okay, that requires schools to post on their website the full cost of the program before scholarship. Okay. We call that the sticker price. That's the price before any sort of discount is applied to the tuition. And so by law, we have to post it. And what that means is that a lot of students, especially international students, will go to a school's website, they'll find the tuition, and they'll say, no way. I cannot afford this. That's crazy. Nobody has that kind of money. And that's because they're looking at the sticker price. They're looking at that price before scholarship. And I'm here to say that that is not the price that most students pay. In fact, at Penn GSC and at almost every other school in the United States, you will not know the cost of a program until after you are admitted. You're not going to know the actual cost of a program until after you are admitted, because that is when a school would offer you scholarship. Okay? It's after you apply to Penn GSE, we evaluate you for scholarship and then we deliver your admission notice along with your scholarship notice so you know exactly how much it's going to cost you after you're admitted. So we don't look at the sticker price online. We look at the net price, the price after scholarship that you get after you are admitted to a program. Okay. So after you apply to all these different schools, you get their offers back, then you start comparing price. That's the time. Don't exclude a school just because you think it's too expensive or that it might be too expensive. Uh, there are a lot of opportunities for funding. And of course, students that apply earlier usually have better chances. Okay. That is true at the graduate level for most schools. Okay. And it is certainly the case that the sooner you apply, the more time you will have to prepare your finances. Okay. For example, our application opened yesterday. It is live. It is ready to go. Most schools have opened around this time frame too. So the sooner you're able to apply, the more time you will have to look for scholarships, and the sooner you will learn about those opportunities. Okay. For those of you that are interested in doctoral studies, let me, here we go. For those of you that are interested in doctoral studies, um, I just want to make a brief comment, okay, that Keep in mind that in the US and in other countries, there are differences between research doctorates and professional doctorates. So at Penn GC, for example, we do offer a Doctor of Philosophy, the PhD in education, but we also offer the Doctor of Education, the EDD degree. Okay. And if you are looking for doctoral programs, the the strongest programs typically are going to be more competitive, but they're also going to offer substantial funding, okay, for PhD students. So at our school, for example, we will fund all PhD students with tuition, fees, health insurance, and a living stipend while you're here. Now, our doctoral PhD programs are quite competitive, but it's worth exploring these options when you're looking at schools across the country as well. I want to spend most of the time, though, talking about funding for master's students because that's where the majority of international students will study. That's where the majority where the majority of you will be looking. Okay, is our programs at the master's level. And graduate aid for master's students in the United States can be grouped into three broad categories. Okay, we can call them buckets, maybe. All right. And you could call one group scholarships, student employment, and student loans, or some type of borrowing. Okay. These are the three ways that most students will fund a master's degree in the United States. And this applies to US citizens, it applies to international students equally. Okay, we'll talk about this. Um, all students are going to use these three general sources. Okay, and so when it comes to, let's talk about scholarships first. Okay, and so when it comes to scholarships, it's important to set expectations. Okay, most schools offer partial tuition scholarships, so it's very rare. It does happen, of course, but it is quite rare that a master's level student will receive sufficient funding to cover 100% of their costs, at least from a single source. It does happen, but it's rare. Even students receiving, say, a Fulbright may still have some extra cost that they need to cover. Okay. So it's important to set expectations, but it's also important to understand the opportunities. Okay. Because they go hand in hand. Scholarships are almost always stackable, meaning they can be combined with each other. So you might receive scholarships from the school to which you were admitted. You might also receive scholarships from external sources. So, for example, you might receive a merit scholarship from Penn GSE plus, say, a Fulbright award. These can be combined, and that will cover a significant amount of your costs. Okay. It's important to understand the difference between, say, a merit scholarship and need based aid. Some schools offer both, some offer one or the other, but merit scholarship is very loosely defined. There's no strict criteria for what that means, but it's generally based on the strength of your application as it relates to the program you're applying to and as it compares to the other students who have applied for the same program. So in most admissions offices, you'll have a group of applications together and you're basically comparing them to say, okay, who's the strongest? Who's the most aligned with our program? And they're typically going to get a higher award. Okay, that's for a merit award. Some schools offer need based aid, and that's where they're looking at your family's finances to determine the cost. Now, that's much rarer. That's not very common at the master's level, but just so you're aware of what the differences are here. Okay, and it's just so important to understand that every school awards scholarships differently. It's really critical to pay attention to deadlines and timelines. Follow the instructions. You don't want to lose out on a scholarship because you misread something or you didn't understand what it meant. Okay. So, for that reason, it's so critical to examine the school's website so that you can maximize your scholarships. Okay. So, it's really important that you understand how a school is going to evaluate you and to make sure that you pay attention to all of those deadlines. Do not make the assumption that schools will cover more than they will or cover less than they will. I see applicants doing both. I've spoken to students who just assumed that that the school would cover more than it promised, right? And that's not true. Most schools are going to tell you exactly how much they're going to fund. They're not going to fund any more than that. But at the same time, the flip side is also true, where students just don't expect to get any help. And then they're surprised when they do. And I would say, look, just follow the directions on each school's website and apply this way. So at Penn GSE, for example, when you apply for one of our master's programs, we will automatically consider you for merit scholarships and for all the scholarships I've listed here, including a brand new one called the Power of Possibility, which will cover 50% of tuition and fees. Okay. And it can be combined with with the other scholarships here too. So we do have this year, we have some students, not many, to be candid, not many, but we do have a few that have received full funding because they were able to stack these awards. Okay. When you're looking at schools' websites and when you're looking, you want to get a sense of what is the potential. Okay. And sometimes schools' websites are a little challenging to navigate, and so in those cases, it is completely appropriate. I would encourage you to reach out to the school with any questions you have. So, for example, if you are on the Penn GSE website and something doesn't make sense or you're not clear, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, so that we can help assist you. You can fill out the registration form in the chat that will put you directly in contact with our programs and with our admissions office so that we can answer any questions you might have going forward. Okay, about that. So the last thing I'll say about scholarships is that some schools require separate applications because you want to build in timeline for those applications. Sometimes they might require you to have a certain amount of paperwork submitted and something like this. At Penn GSC, we do not. At Penn GSC, the only application you need to fill out is your application for admission. We use that to base our scholarship decisions on. So it's very streamlined. It's very simple for you. Um, and that's how we do it, but every school's different. So again, make sure you reach out to those schools. Okay. All right. So I think we've all been in that position where it's a conundrum where you need experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience. Okay. And this is where student employment can really fit in well. Okay. Student employment is where you, as the student, are working for the school. That's it. You're working on campus for the school and earning funding that way. Now, some schools will offer you tuition remission for your work. Okay, so the way the way student employment operates can vary significantly between schools. Some schools will, like I said, will offer you tuition remission in exchange for a certain number of hours per week. Um, Others are going to give you a weekly paycheck or a monthly paycheck, perhaps. And that's how it is at Penn GSC. Our student workers, what we call graduate assistants, RGAs, they will work for 5 hours per week at the master's level, and they're going to earn $21 per hour. Okay, so this is open to international students. In fact, every year we have 2/3 of our GAs are international students. So it's very popular and it's very um, open, definitely open to international students. It's a great way to really, I'd say, having a job on campus accomplishes really three things. Okay. It can give you more experience related to your studies. Okay. So that when you graduate, you'll have some tangible work experience along with a degree. It helps build your network, which is critical in a lot of fields, or expand your network even more than what you would get in a master's degree itself. And then it also gives you money, right? Gives you money for living expenses. Now, most types of jobs, especially certainly at Penn GSC, these are not going to be sufficient to cover your living expenses entirely or to cover your tuition and fees, but it will help offset them. Okay, it'll certainly cover a significant amount of those living expenses and let you um, so that it gives you yet another way to fund your program. So scholarships plus student employment. See how we're doing this. We're kind of building it all together. We're cobbling it together as a full package here. Um, and so it's really important that you understand the school's policies, okay, about where 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 you can work and in what capacity you can work. At Penn GSE, you can work up to 20 hours per week on campus. Okay, and that's completely fine for your visa. It's totally fine for your financial aid. That's how we do it. But other schools might be different. So be sure to, again, reach out to the school about what types of employment they have. And another thing about student employment, it's just a great way to meet people. It's a great way to, really build that network and get some meet people that you might not have met just going to class. Okay, so speaking of living expenses, this is something I realize that a lot of people don't talk about all the time, but I think it's so important. Okay, remember the United States is a large country. Okay, it's a huge place, and so the cost of living varies tremendously. Okay, so for example, we are located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That is about 2 hours south of New York and about 3 hours north of Washington, D.C., on the east coast of the U.S. We're the fifth largest city in the United States. Um, but we are, depending on where you look, but we are close to 100% less expensive than, say, New York City. Okay. So looking at where you're going to live is an important factor when deciding where to go. Okay. So living expenses are a major part of the cost, and a lot of schools don't really explain them very well online. And part of the reason is because they vary tremendously student by student. So much of this is like our lifestyle choices, but you can still get a sense for a place by looking up uh, rents, the common rents in the area. For example, for our area in the United States, it's a private apartment typically rents for around $1,000 a month, but you can get far less expensive than that. You could also spend a lot more. There's a very long range. I know that some of our students are only spending a few $100s a month because they have a roommate, for example. A lot of these are lifestyle choices, and it's just important to get that understanding. So, yes, location matters, but also what types of infrastructure does the school have to support graduate students, and what does this look like campus by campus? So, our school, for example, Penn GSC, we are an urban campus. We are in the city. Okay. You're not taking a trolley, you're not taking a train into the city. We are part of the city itself. So it's an urban campus. If you don't like cities, if that's not something you're interested in, then maybe we're not the right location for you. Okay. To be honest. If you, but then again, if you love the city and you love the all the opportunities and the culture and just the exciting things to do, then maybe we are the right location for you. So pay attention to the general location, but then also look at the what the university itself is offering. Okay, so for example, Penn GSC, we do not have graduate housing. Okay, we do not have special dorms for graduate students, and that's because we are in the city. Most of our students live in private apartments within a few minutes walk of their classes. Okay, so we don't have large dormitories for graduate students because we are in the city. There's plenty of housing to go around, and there's plenty of places to live that are very convenient and safe for our students. And so that's that's how our school is. But other schools that might be more isolated, they might be in the middle of the countryside, and so they might have massive dormitories for graduate students, and you have to think to yourself, well, what do you want? What are you interested in? Those are important factors. I'll say there is one, you know, there are sometimes opportunities, and this is worth exploring at other schools. There are sometimes opportunities to sort of earn your rent, okay, through a part-time job. And one opportunity we have still, even though there's not dormitories for graduate students, we do have some graduate students that are living in undergraduate dormitories as what we call resident advisors. And to be a GRA, a graduate resident advisor, means that you're working with undergraduate students, you're helping them, you're more or less being like a big brother, big sister to them. And in exchange, the university gives you free rent. Okay. So after you are admitted to Penn GSE, you can apply to be a GRA. It's a great opportunity to get free rent, to meet people, that sort of things. And lots of other schools will have similar programs. I just want to make sure you're aware of them so that you know to ask, right? You might not even know to ask about that. So I want to make sure that you're in a position to really think about that. Okay. Another phrase you're going to hear a lot is off campus versus on campus. Just remember what that means in the US. That just means that if a building is on campus, it means that the university owns the building. And if it's off campus, it means it doesn't. It doesn't mean that you're far away from campus. So off campus does not mean far away from campus necessarily. Like I said earlier, most of our students live off campus in buildings that the university does not own, but they're still within a 10-minute walk of class. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind about some of the terminology um, when you're doing this. Okay, and so I would just continue with this and say, in the same way that you want to explore the employment opportunities, you also want to definitely pay attention to what every school's policy is regarding international students. Okay. It's important to understand the type of financial aid offered to international students because this can vary tremendously by school. Okay. Some schools offer very little aid to international students, or perhaps they offer scholarships to a handful. So I know many schools will offer they'll offer fewer scholarships, but they'll be larger. So maybe a handful of international students will get larger awards. That's pretty common too. But it's important that you try to understand what they're offering. And the way to do that is to contact the school. It's often the best way. Their website is going to be very generic typically. So if you find a school you're interested in, you'll want to reach out to them and just interact and get them to tell you exactly what type of aid they offer. So at Penn GSE, for example, our aid is pretty evenly distributed between domestic and international students. There's really no difference at all between the amount of merit scholarships that our domestic students or our international students receive from Penn GSE. In fact, at our school, and you want to ask this for others too, but at our school, international student aid mirrors domestic aid in that most most international students will receive scholarship, many will work on campus, and most will borrow money of some sort. Okay, the only difference really is that U.S. citizens borrow money from the U.S. government. International students typically borrow money from their home government or from family and friends. Okay, but again, going back to that earlier slide where I said most financial aid, it's grouped into three categories: scholarships, employment, and borrowing money and loans. That's the common way that most students, whether they're U.S. citizens or international students, that's how most students will fund a master's level degree. Okay, so it's just good to keep in mind how that how that really works. And like I said, it's very common. Okay. So what I would encourage you to do now too, because remember what I said, it's rare, candidly speaking, it's rare for a master's student to get fully funded. Okay. So uh, if you do not have personal resources to close the gap between scholarship and the cost, then you should start exploring borrowing options. Okay. And our international students borrow money just like our domestic students do. The only difference is they can't borrow from the US government. That's the only difference, okay? There are some lenders that will lend money to international students, okay? In fact, most uh, most US banks will let you borrow from them if you have a US cosigner. Now, we realize most international students do not have a US cosigner. I'm only mentioning this in the off chance you might, um, that is an option you should be aware of. But there are other lenders which will lend to international students. One of them I just know off the top of my, two of them that I know off the top of my head. One is called Prodigy, Prodigy, and the other is called Empower. So the letter M and then Power, Empower. These are two lending institutions that will make loans to international students, and they do not require a U.S. cosigner or a U.S. credit score. Um, I'm not familiar with their interest rates, but usually, again, for any type of borrowing, you want to use that as the last resort. So the first step is to, of course, accrue as many scholarships as possible, figure out what kind of job you might be able to get, look at all your personal resources, and then you would use a loan to cover the difference. Okay. That's really how most students throughout the US, domestic and internationally, will do this. Okay. That's how it works. So, the other thing I'll say, I think it's important that you get a good sense of how to really compare your offers. So let's imagine that you've gone through the trouble of applying and now you have 4 or 5 offers from schools. Okay. It's very tempting. And I know this because I talk with hundreds of students every year. I have the same conversation. It's very tempting just to look at the scholarship and say, oh, well, this school offered me 10 and this school offered me 15. I should go with the one that gives me the higher scholarship. But I would caution you against that. Okay. Instead, remember what we said before. The first thing you need to understand is the net price. What is the actual price of the program? Okay. Maybe that second school offered you a higher scholarship, but is the overall cost higher to begin with? So maybe that scholarship isn't as compelling. To do this, what you need to do is you'll need to go to the school's website. Every school will have their tuition and fees posted online. They have to. Okay. Take that sticker price that I mentioned, subtract out all of your scholarships that you've received, and then look at the net price. Use that as one point of comparison. Okay. But you also have to consider living expenses. So maybe one school is a little bit more expensive even after scholarship. But then you look at the living expenses and you're like, oh, well, this school is in a very high price area, but this school is in a very low price area. I'll actually save money going to the lower priced area rather than the high priced area. Okay. These are all the factors that you need to consider when you're really understanding how much something is going to cost you here. Pay attention to the length of the program. That's vital. Many programs in the US are 2 years. That's almost like the standard, a 2-year master's degree. But at GSE, for example, most of our programs can be accomplished in 12 months, 1 year. Most of our programs are 1 year in length. Um, we have a few that are 2 years, but most are 1 year. And we even have a couple that could be done in 9 months. So that's important, really, to pay attention to and to understand uh, what your options are, right? Maybe the longer, maybe you're looking for a program where you can get in, you can get the skills you need, and then move on, right? um, and so, because the longer you're in a program, that remember, that just represents additional living expenses. It represents an opportunity cost for jobs that you're not taking because you're in school, right? So these are all things to understand when you're trying to compare a program. When you get those offers of admission back, don't just look at the scholarship. If you learn nothing else from this webinar, I hope that's a major takeaway. Do not just compare scholarships, compare the net price, compare the living expenses, the length of the program, and then after this, then you can put it together to figure out what school might be the best fit for you. Okay. And so I'm going to close here in a minute and just leave you with some thoughts about, well, why are we talking about a graduate degree in the first place? And this might sound like a funny question. Why get a master's degree? It might sound like a funny question to ask during a webinar about graduate school, but I think it's vital to begin here. Before you start thinking about scholarships and living expenses and loans and everything else, think deeply to yourself, why a master's degree at all? Graduate school represents a tremendous investment of time, energy, and of course, money. Knowing why you are doing this is so important. Okay. It is so important to understanding the type of return you might expect on that investment. Okay. A master's degree, a master's degree is an investment in yourself. Okay. It is a investment with a return over a lifetime. Okay. It gives you the opportunities to explore things you don't know that you don't know. We call those the unknown unknowns, things that you're not aware that you don't know. All right. It opens doors, in other words. It really opens doors. And so I think it's critical to really understand your passion, your reason for doing this, so that you can be there for the long haul. All right. And really understand why you're taking this time and making this effort. Okay. Just understand that no school is going to be able to promise you any specific type of return on their degrees. If some school does, I would not recommend that. Okay. No school should be making those types of concrete specific promises. um, and looking at where a program's graduates go, that's helpful. That is helpful. Most of our graduates, for example, are very well employed after school, and they do quite well. But that's not you specifically, right? That's other people. Just remember that the main determinant of your success is you. You are the main determinant of your success, your motivation, your effort, your knowledge and skills, the relationships you made. Okay. A master's degree will give you the tools and the network to help make your goals a reality. Okay, that's where a master's degree comes into play. Okay, that's where the real value is, and that's where the value compounds over time. Okay, so I just will um, leave you with those thoughts, and thank you so much for your time. Those conclude my formal talk. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Uh, we certainly would encourage any questions that you might have. Don't hesitate to reach out. By all means, fill out the registration link that's online there so that you can get more information about our school. And I'm happy to take any questions we have in the time remaining. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason, for this presentation. It was really useful for me as well, because I'm also a PhD student, but in Ukraine. So it was really nice to listen to the process of financing your PhD in the United States. And we have some comments and questions from our viewers. I would like to start with a comment from YouTube. And Dmitro Plotnik, he says that it's a great advice to apply earlier to get your costs. However, it is hard for international students, as majority of the universities offer only one application window for international students. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, I'll say that it really it's hard. I'll say this just as a general comment to his specific question, but also just to everyone listening. Okay. Remember that, like I said, there's over 5,000 universities in the United States. Okay. And those universities are very diverse among themselves because some are public institutions, some are private institutions, some are religious institutions. Okay. There's a whole variety of these types of schools. And so what that means is, yes, some schools have a specific window for international students, others do not. Okay. And it's just that much more important to really familiarize yourself with the requirements for the very specific school to which you're applying. Okay. So at our school at Penn GSE, for example, our application opens on September 1st, and that's for domestic and international. That's everybody. Okay. And we have a February 15th priority deadline. Okay. So we're going to try to fill our class with applications received by that date. But at our school, we will continue to admit if there's still space in the class, okay, for master's students. Our PhDs are due on December 1st. That's a firm deadline, okay? But for our master's students, it can be rolling. And see that nuance? This is just one school. This is one school within one university. Keep that in mind too. Remember, University of Pennsylvania is 12 graduate colleges and they're all separate. They all are completely different. We we do not have the same timeline as the School of Medicine, for example. Totally different. You'd have to talk to them. Same. So when I said there's 5,000 universities, just remember there's tens of thousands of programs, and that's really what you would need to pay attention to. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. So one more question from Lubov Didik. And she says, hello, thank you for this useful webinar. If I'm interested in doctoral degree, where should I start looking for financing? And also, is it possible to get a doctoral degree being in another country?
Yeah. So the first piece you'd have to look at. I'll start from the top, right? You'd have to really ask yourself, why a doctoral program? Okay, and I'm assuming that you have and that you understand that what that is, but just understanding that a doctoral program represents a very different trajectory than what most students might think it does. Okay. But okay, you're dead set. You want a doctoral degree. Wonderful. The next step, yeah, looking for the right school, the right program. Um, when you're looking at financing, most schools are going to be very explicit about what they offer to admitted doctoral students. Okay. And also what the terms and conditions are going to be. Um, Now, I can certainly not speak for all US schools. Like I said, there's tens of thousands of programs. I won't even begin. What I can say, though, is that in general, it's common, let's say, it's very common that most programs that are fully funded, most fully funded doctoral programs will require you to be in person in the United States. Okay. Now, they might allow some remote work. They might allow you to research while you're abroad. There's all permutations. There's too many to myriad possibilities. Okay. But fundamentally, most will require you to at least be in person for the majority of your coursework and this sort of thing. Okay. That's certainly the way it is at our school at the University of Pennsylvania. Um, but so they're not going to give you an online PhD, for example. Okay. Uh, some schools might. Some schools might. But it's rare that those schools would offer you full funding. That's also true. Okay.
Okay, so then a few questions from me. So you mentioned such as UNESCO award.
Yeah.
And it's a bit clear, it seems to me, for our students and viewers about Fulbright, so it's quite popular. But what is UNESCO award, and could you just tell a few words about this, like scholarship or?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so at our school, we have the way our scholarships are broken down is we have more or less we call just quote merit awards. These are generic merit scholarships, and they just mean it just means that you have a very strong application. Congratulations, okay? And those will cover up to about 20% of your degree. Okay, at the high end, it's a range, but that's the high end. Then there's some special awards like the Power of Possibility that I mentioned. Okay, and that's for students that are coming from a disadvantaged background who want to make a difference in helping other people from a disadvantaged background. That's why we're calling it possibility, right? That's the heart of it. And that would cover 50% of tuition fees. Now, the UNESCO is a special it's a relationship that we have with UNESCO, as it sounds, okay, as the name implies, and um, that is for students specifically. So we have another category of scholarships that are for specific programs within our school. This is where I was saying before, it's the program you're applying to, not the school. you're not applying to UPenn, you're applying to Penn GSE's School of International Education Development, okay, for example. And so that's the program where the UNESCO is housed. So only students admitted to the International Education Development Program. Okay, this is a program designed to help you build educational infrastructure in developing countries. Okay, and so students admitted to that program can be considered for the UNESCO, and that will cover 100% of tuition and fees for that student. Okay, um, we offer two every year. Okay, so it's very competitive, but there's two chances, and the thing is, you can also, even if you may not be awarded the UNESCO, you could certainly be awarded a merit scholarship and maybe the power of possibility and dean scholar. So you have all these opportunities. You're going to be considered for them. Now, there that program does require a separate application for the UNESCO specifically because it's controlled by the program. I believe it's just a quick paragraph or two. They want you to just describe what you intend to do with the degree. Okay, those details will be posted on our website later. But that's what it is. That's what it does. We have other program specific scholarships as well. So if you go to our website, you can see exactly which programs have unique awards that are aligned with them.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it means that students, like especially international students, can have like additional opportunity in some programs. Yeah, like using
Oh
this.
yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
great.
the UNESCO, um, to my knowledge, has always gone to an international student. So
Mhm. Okay, thank you. So one more question and comment.
mhm.
So some of our students, they wonder if they already have bachelor degree. So is it possible to obtain master's and doctoral degree at the same time?
You asked if it's possible to pursue a master's and a doctoral degree at the same
Yeah,
time.
at the same time.
So I'll say I can answer that in a couple of ways. So on the one hand, yes, some schools, some programs do that. Okay, others do not. Okay, and and here's where it gets. So remember how I said that the nice thing about America is all the diversity of programs? Well, that's also the same challenge. Okay, because for example, at the University of Pennsylvania, one university, 12 graduate colleges. My one school of education, has over 40 programs. Okay, and they have different criteria. Remember, you're applying to a program, not a school. Okay, so is it possible? Well, it's possible at our school's College of Arts and Science, which is a separate graduate school. In those programs, let's say you're getting a master's in chemistry or in English literature or something. Okay, yes, those students quite often will earn a master's on their way to earning a PhD. Okay, very common. Not at our school, not at GSC. Okay, our programs expect you to have a master's and then apply for a PhD. Okay, and so again, it comes down to understanding where you're applying, what the requirements are for that specific program, that specific degree. Just remember, you're applying to a program, not a school at the master's level.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you also mentioned such as Doctor of Education. The
Hmm.
same, like I compared just with Ukrainian system of education, and we have PhD, the same like you, but it seems to me Doctor of Education is something new, or might be it just might sound like a new one. Could you please also like
Yeah,
just tell me
absolutely.
about it?
Absolutely. So, a lot of different fields, okay, have professional doctorates in those fields. So, the main and a doctor of education is what we consider a professional doctorate. So, it is a terminal degree. Okay, you are awarded a doctorate from the university. They are equal in that regard. PhD, EDD, they're both doctorates. Okay, the difference really is in terms of the orientation of the program. Okay, what is the main emphasis of the work that you do? What is the main emphasis of the research that you do? Okay, so a PhD is really oriented towards discovering new knowledge and creating new knowledge in a particular space. So, a doctor of philosophy in education. Okay. The Doctor of Education, the EDD, is really concerned with understanding phenomenon that exists in time and space already. Okay. So understanding a known question. At our school, for example, the EDD and PhD students have the same exact curriculum for the first 2 years. There's no difference. Okay. The difference comes down. The difference comes down to the dissertation. Okay, so a PhD dissertation. So I'll say this: an EDD dissertation is going to try to solve a particular question that already exists. They're going to have that. They're going to work towards an answer, like an elaborate case study. Whereas a PhD student is going to come up with a question in the first place and then try to answer it. Okay, that's the best way I can describe it. But here's the thing. Let me be clear. We have faculty, okay, professors who hold EDDs. We have functional deans, say a dean of student services, that has a PhD. So they're not mutually exclusive. It's not like, well, you have this degree, so you're going to go into this place. It really comes down to what types of questions, what types of answers you're looking for. Also, EDD students tend to be already in their career. Okay, so they're trying to become better at what they are already doing versus a PhD student, like I said before, this is often entry level training to begin a career in academia. Okay. So that's a big difference in terms of who you would go to school with. Let me put it this way: if you're already well established into a career, okay, you're a mid career professional, almost always the EDD is going to be the best option for you. Okay. Because it's going to give you the research skills, it's going to give you the full curriculum of a doctoral program, but you're not trying to start a whole new career in academia. You're trying to become better at something you're already doing. And I guess that would be the best way to describe the difference between a PhD and an EDD. Okay. Also, an EDD typically only takes 2 to 3 years versus 4 to 6 for a PhD. So that's important.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we have one more comment from Ruslan Kuliyev from YouTube. And he says, just came to say hello, got my master's and PhD degree financially covered in the United States. It's all very much possible and not as difficult as it might appear.
Oh,
Thanks for the efforts, Education USA. Thank you, Ruslan, and thank you, Jason, for this wonderful presentation. I hope it was much useful for our viewers and especially for for future students of United States. And I hope that many Ukrainian students will come to your university
I hope so.
next year, maybe even this year, who knows
Yeah.
actually. So thank you for joining us today. And dear viewers, if you have any questions or comments, you also can write Education USA on Facebook page or Instagram page or connect us by mail. Thank you so much and see you.